In the quiet town of Riverstone, Virginia, a 90-year-old woman was about to teach a vicious motorcycle gang a lesson they'd never forget. Eleanor Ellie Harper seemed like any other elderly resident until the night, Reapers made the mistake of harassing her at a local gas station. What the notorious gang didn't know was that this gentle-looking grandmother was one of Vietnam's most decorated helicopter pilots, with over 200 successful rescue missions behind enemy lines. When their intimidation crossed the line, Ellie made one phone call that would change everything. The Night Reapers, led by the ruthless Talon, thought they were dealing with an easy target. Instead, they found themselves face to face with over 50 combat-hardened veteran bikersmen whose lives Ellie had saved decades ago in the jungles of Vietnam. What began as a day of bullying and harassment ended in an extraordinary transformation that would reshape the future of Riverstone forever. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from. If you like this story, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have a special story for you. The morning sun was just beginning to warm the quiet streets of Riverstone when Ellie Harper started her daily routine. Her silver hair was neatly pinned back, her posture still remarkably straight from years of military service. She guided her weathered Ford Taurus into Sam's Gas and Go, the same station she'd been visiting for the past 30 years. "Good morning, Mrs. Harper," called Tommy, the young attendant, his smile bright and genuine. "The usual today?" "Just a full tank," Tommy Ellie replied, carefully stepping out of her car. Her movements were measured, but purposeful, a testament to the discipline that had carried her through decades of service. The familiar scent of gasoline and morning dew filled the air as she began filling her tank. Her mind wandered to the VA meetings she needed to attend later that morning. These meetings were more than just gatherings. They were a connection to her past, to the men and women who understood what it meant to serve. The peaceful morning shattered with the distant rumble of motorcycles. The sound grew louder, more menacing, until the thunder of engines filled the small gas station. 5 motorcycles, then 10, then 15, rolled into the lot, their chrome gleaming under the morning sun. The Night Reapers had arrived. Ellie's hand remained steady on the pump as she watched them. Through the reflection in her car window, her military training kicked in automatically. Assess the threat, maintain awareness, stay calm. The leader, a man they called Talon, dismounted his bike with practiced arrogance. His leather vest bore patches that spoke of violence and intimidation, his eyes cold as they fixed upon her. "Oh, what do we have here?" Talon's voice carried across the lot, drawing snickers from his gang. "Grandma's out for her morning drive," Ellie continued, filling her tank, her expression neutral. She'd faced worse in her time, much worse. The jungles of Vietnam had taught her that real danger rarely announced itself so boldly. "I'm just getting gas," she replied evenly. "No need for any trouble." One of the gang members, a tall man with a scraggly beard named Zane, sauntered closer. His eyes caught the glint of her license plate holder. "Hey, Talon, check this out. Vietnam veteran. You hear that?" The old lady claims she's a vet. Talon's laughter was sharp and mocking. "A woman veteran? What did you do in Nam, sweetheart? Serve coffee to the real soldiers?" The words struck something deep inside Ellie, but her expression remained unchanged. They couldn't know about the countless nights she'd spent flying through. Enemy fire, the hundreds of soldiers she'd pulled from certain death, the medals that sat in a box in her closet. "I served my country," she said simply. Replacing the gas pump, Talon stepped closer, his boots scraping against the concrete. "Served your country? Let me tell you something about service, old woman. It's the only thing you've served is dinner." The other gang members spread out, forming a loose circle around her car. Tommy had disappeared inside the station, his face pale as he reached for the phone. Ellie knew he was probably calling the police, but she also knew they wouldn't arrive in time to matter. "You should move along," Talon continued, his voice dropping to a threatening growl. "This isn't your kind of place anymore." The Night Reapers own Riverstone now. Ellie straightened her back, her eyes meeting Talon's without flinching. "Young man, I've faced things that would make your little gang run crying home to mama. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting to attend." She moved to open her car door, but one of the gang members slammed it shut. The sound echoed across the lot like a gunshot. Ellie's heart rate didn't even flutter. She'd heard real gunshots, felt the heat of real explosions. Maybe you didn't hear me clearly. Talon leaned in close, his breath hot against her face. This is our town now, and in our town, you show respect. Ellie's voice remained steady as she replied. Respect is earned, son, and so far, all I see are boys playing at being men. The words hung in the air like smoke, and for a moment, the only sound was the idle rumble of motorcycle engines. Then Talon's face twisted into something ugly, something dangerous. His hand shot out, grabbing Ellie's arm with bruising force. You want to learn about respect? We'll teach you all about respect. As his fingers dug into her arm, Ellie's mind flashed back to a night in '68, when she'd pulled a young soldier from the burning wreckage of his helicopter. That soldier had grown up to become Colonel Robert Steele Grayson, now the leader of the largest veteran motorcycle club in the state. The same Robert Grayson who had told her, if you ever need anything, Ellie, anything at all, you just call. She hadn't needed to make that call in all these years, but as she looked into Talon's eyes, seeing the cruelty there, she knew that was about to change. The Night Reapers had no idea what they had just started, but they were about to learn a lesson about real strength, real courage, and real respect. And it would begin with a single phone call. Talon's grip on Ellie's arm tightened as his gang circled closer. The morning sun cast long shadows across the gas station's cracked pavement, turning the scene into a dark tableau of intimidation. But Ellie Harper hadn't survived Vietnam by giving in to bullies. Take your hand off me, she said, her voice carrying the same tone she'd used to command helicopter crews through enemy fire. Something in her voice made Talon hesitate for just a moment. His fingers loosened slightly, but his sneer remained fixed. What, Grandma? You'll tell on us? I don't make threats, Ellie replied, carefully extracting her arm from his grip. I never have, but I promise you, son, you're making a mistake. One of the other gang members, a younger man with a snake tattoo coiling up his neck named Riley, laughed harshly. Hear that, Talon? The old lady's making promises, Ellie used there. Moment of amusement to slide into her car, her movements deliberate and controlled. Through the windshield, she could see Tommy inside the station, still on the phone, his face tight with worry. She knew the local police wouldn't do much. The Night Reapers had been terrorizing Riverstone for months now, and law enforcement seemed powerless to stop them. You're not going anywhere, Talon declared, placing his hand on her car hood. Not until we teach you about respect. Respect? Ellie started her engine, the familiar rumble of her old Taurus, bringing comfort. Let me tell you something about respect. I earned mine pulling men twice your size out of burning helicopters while bullets flew past my head. What have you done besides terrorize innocent people? Her words struck a nerve. Talon's face darkened, and he signaled to his gang.
Ow.
Within moments, they had surrounded her car with their motorcycles, blocking her exit from every angle. Get out of the car, Talon demanded. Now, instead of complying, Ellie reached for her phone. The action made several gang members tense up, expecting a call to the police. But Ellie wasn't calling the authorities, not yet. You want to see what real respect looks like? She asked, her fingers hovering over the keypad. Just wait, Talon laughed, the sound echoing off the gas station's metal roof. Oh, I get it. You're calling for help. Maybe your grandkids? The police? Go ahead. Call whoever you want. We'll still be here. Ellie's mind flashed back to a particularly harrowing night in Vietnam. The rain had been coming down in sheets, visibility near zero. But she'd heard the distress cola squad was pinned down, taking heavy fire. Among them was a young lieutenant named Robert Grayson. She'd flown in blind, using nothing but instinct and skill, and pulled them all out alive. You boys ever hear of the Patriot Sentinels? She asked, her finger pressing the first number. Several of the gang members shifted uncomfortably. The Patriot Sentinels was well known in biker circles. A motorcycle club composed entirely of combat veterans, led by the legendary Steele Grayson. They weren't just any biker group. They were organized, disciplined, and commanded respect even from the most hardened outlaws. What's that got to do with anything? Riley asked. But there was an edge of uncertainty in his voice now. Everything, Ellie replied simply, continuing to dial. You see, back in '68, there was this young lieutenant. His chopper went down deep in enemy territory. Everyone said it was a suicide mission to go in after him, but I went anyway. The phone began to ring. Talon's expression flickered between anger and confusion. That Lieutenant Ellie continued, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet lot. His name was Robert Grayson. We need to understand what we're really fighting for, Ellie said, her voice drawing everyone's attention. This isn't about territory or pride. It's about the soul of Riverstone.
Ow.
She stood, moving to the window.
Ow.
I've lived here 40 years. Watched children grow up, families put down roots. The Night Reapers aren't just threatening our safety, they're threatening our way of life. Steele Grayson nodded slowly. You're right. But how do we fight them without turning Riverstone into a war zone? The same way I fought in Vietnam, Ellie replied, turning back to face them. With precision, intelligence, and by choosing our battles carefully. She returned to the map, pointing to specific locations. They've made themselves look strong by spreading fear, but spread too thin, even the strongest force becomes vulnerable. Chief. Daniels leaned forward, intrigued. What are you suggesting? We start with the businesses they're extorting, Ellie explained. The Patriot Sentinels provides protection, shows the town they're not alone. Meanwhile, we gather evidence of their drug operation, real evidence that even City Hall can't ignore. They won't take that lying down, Lisa warned. No, Ellie agreed, they won't. Which is exactly what we're counting on. When people get angry, they get sloppy, make mistakes. Steele Grayson smiled grimly. It's just like that night in Contum. Draw them in, make them commit their forces, then hit them where they're weakest. Exactly, Ellie nodded. This time we're not fighting with bullets. We're fighting for hearts and minds. Show Riverstone that there's still good people willing to stand up to bullies. Daniel scratched his chin thoughtfully. It could work, but it's risky. The Night Reapers will retaliate. Of course they will, Ellie said calmly. But this time, we'll be ready. On this time, they'll learn what real strength looks like. Outside, the sun had begun its descent, casting long shadows across Riverstone. In houses and shops across town, people watched and waited, wondering what would come next. The arrival of the Patriot Sentinels had given them something they hadn't felt in months. Hope. Steele Grayson stood. His decision made. All right, Ellie, we'll do this your way. But I want you protected at all times. Talon's the type to take. This personally, Ellie smiled slightly. Robert, I've been shot at by better men than Talon, but I appreciate the concern. As the meeting concluded and plans were set in motion, Lisa pulled Ellie aside. You know what you're starting here, don't you? This could change everything. That's exactly what I'm counting on, Ellie replied, her eyes steady with determination. Sometimes things need to change. What? Sometimes they need to be forced to change. The war for Riverstone was about to enter a new phase, not with violence and chaos, but with strategy and purpose. Just as she had in Vietnam, Ellie Harper was about to teach another lesson about courage, respect, and the true meaning of strength. And this time, the whole town would be watching. Dawn broke over Riverstone's historic district, painting the old brick buildings in shades of gold. The street was quiet, except for the steady rumble of motorcycles, not the chaotic roar of the Night Reapers, but the disciplined hum of Patriot Sentinels' bikes positioned at strategic points along 3rd Street, inside Mason's Hardware. The oldest store in Riverstone, Frank Mason was having his first peaceful morning in months. His hands shook slightly as he counted out his register drawer, not from fear this time, but from relief. They usually show up by now, he told the 2 Patriot Sentinels members stationed inside his store. Every morning, like clockwork, demanding their protection money. One of the veterans, a former Army Ranger named Ethan, nodded grimly. Not today, they won't. Ellie sat in her usual booth at Clara's Diner across the street, sipping coffee and watching the scene unfold. Steele Grayson sat across from her, his own coffee untouched. They'll test us, he said quietly. Probably today. I'm counting on it. Ellie replied, her eyes scanning the street. Talon's not the type to back down easily. His pride won't let him. As if on cue, the distant sound of approaching motorcycles filled the air. The Night Reapers appeared at the end of 3rd Street, their bikes gleaming in the morning light. Talon led the pack, but he pulled up short when he saw the Patriot Sentinels' positions. Right on schedule, Ellie murmured, setting down her coffee cup. The Night Reapers idled their bikes, clearly unsure how to proceed. The Patriot Sentinels. Members didn't move, didn't react. They simply watched. Their presence a clear message. Talon revved his engine angrily and dismounted, storming toward Mason's hardware. 2 Patriot Sentinels members stepped out to meet him, their posture relaxed but ready. "This is private property," Ethan said calmly. "Mr. Mason isn't interested in your kind of protection anymore. Is that right?" Talon snarled, his face reddening. "Why don't we ask Frank himself?" Inside the diner, Steele Grayson started to rise, but Ellie placed a hand on his arm. "Wait," she said softly. "Watch what happens." Frank Mason emerged from his store, standing straight for the first time in months. Behind him, more veterans appeared, a solid wall of support. Palling. Frank's voice carried across the suddenly quiet street. "We don't need your protection. We've got real veterans watching over us now." Talon's hand twitched toward his jacket, but he froze when he saw how many Patriot Sentinels members had materialized around him. They hadn't drawn weapons, hadn't made threats, they simply stood there, their presence an unmistakable warning. "This isn't over, old man," Talon spat at Frank. "None of this is over." He turned, his eyes finding Ellie through the diner window. Their gazes locked, and Ellie saw something dangerous flash across his face, wounded pride mixed with murderous rage. "You did this?" he shouted, pointing at her. "You think you can just walk in and turn everyone against us? You built something?" "Here." Ellie stood slowly, walking to the diner's door. Every eye on the street followed her movement as she stepped outside. "What exactly did you build, son?" Her voice was steady, carrying to every ear. Fear, intimidation. "Not building. That's destroying." Other business owners had emerged from their shops now, watching the confrontation. The Night Reapers shifted uneasily on their bikes, outnumbered and outmatched by the Patriot Sentinels' disciplined presence. "You don't understand anything." Talon's voice shook with rage. "This town was dead before we came. We made it strong." "No," Ellie replied, taking another step forward. "You made it afraid. There's a difference." She gestured to the veterans around them. "These men and women, they know what real strength is. They fought real battles, not just bullied innocent people. They understand something you never have. Respect isn't taken by force. It's earned through actions." Talon's face contorted with fury. He took a step toward Ellie, but instantly found his path blocked by Steele Grayson and 3 other veterans. "Think carefully about your next move, son." Grayson's voice was soft but carried an edge of steel. "Very carefully." For a long moment, tension crackled through the air. Then Talon backed away, his movements jerky with suppressed rage. "This is our town," he snarled, mounting his bike. "You want a war? You've got one." The Night Reapers roared away, leaving behind a cloud of exhaust and threats. As their noise faded, the street remained silent for a moment. Then, surprisingly, someone started to clap. Others joined in. The sound building as business owners and residents emerged fully from their shops. Frank Mason approached Ellie, tears in his eyes. "Thank you," he said simply. "We've been waiting for someone to stand up to them. We were afraid." "You don't have to be afraid anymore," Ellie assured him. "But this isn't over. Talon will be back, and he'll be looking." For revenge, Steele Grayson joined them, his expression serious. "We've won the first battle, but you're right. This is just the beginning. He'll hit back hard, try to make an example."
"Let him try,"
Ellie replied, watching the gathering crowd of townspeople.
People see me stay. Tested.
Great. At words. What'll was it? Horst. What is it? Hormone. Quyword. Whatever, it will work. Con word will sell. I will out. Lisa Wong arrived, slightly out of breath. Just got word the Night Reapers are gathering at their warehouse, calling in more reinforcements. Ellie nodded, unsurprised. Good. Let them come. The more forces they commit, the more vulnerable they become. She turned to address the gathered veterans and townspeople. Today we showed them that Riverstone isn't afraid anymore. But tomorrow, they'll try to remind us why we should be. We need to be ready. The sun had risen fully now, washing the street in bright light. The shadow of fear that had hung over Riverstone was lifting, but everyone knew the real storm was still coming. Talon and his gang wouldn't go quietly, wouldn't accept defeat easily. But looking at the faces around her veterans standing tall, townspeople finding their courage easily, knew they had already won something important. They had given Riverstone back its dignity, its spirit. Now they just had to keep it. Voice carried over the rumble of engines. Just like old times, the captain. Lee smiled as she got into her car, the veterans forming up around her. Just like old times, Lieutenant. Just like old times. The convoy pulled out of the gas station. A display of power and discipline that couldn't have been more different from the Night Reaper's chaotic presence. In its wake, Tommy stood watching, a smile spreading across his face. Something was changing in Riverstone, and for the first time in months, it felt like change for the better. Across town. In an abandoned warehouse that served as the Night Reaper's clubhouse, Talon paced the oil-stained floor. His boots echoed against the concrete as his gang watched nervously. The morning's encounter had shaken their usual confidence, though none would admit it openly. The Patriot Sentinels, Talon spat, kicking an empty beer can across the floor. That old woman knows Steele Grayson. Of all the people in this worthless town, we had to pick her. Riley leaned against his bike, trying to maintain his tough exterior. So what? They're just another MC. We've dealt with rival clubs before. Of the older members, a man called Buck shook his head. No, these guys are different. They're not just bikers. They're combat, that's organized, disciplined. They've seen real war. We've seen plenty of action, Talon growled, but there was an edge of uncertainty in his voice. Not like them, Buck insisted. I heard stories about Steele Grayson. He runs. The Patriot Sentinels, like a military unit. And that woman, if she really is the pilot they call the Angel of Kisan, I don't care if she's the Queen of England. Talon exploded, his fist slamming into a nearby locker. This is our town now. Can't let some old woman and her veteran friends push us around. We'll lose everything we've built here. Meanwhile, Ellie's convoy arrived at the VA center. The Patriot Sentinels' bikes formed a protective perimeter around the parking lot. As she stepped out of her car, several veterans who'd been waiting for the meeting came out to greet her, their eyes wide at the impressive escort. Quite an entrance. Smiled Lisa Wong, a Gulf War veteran who ran the VA support group. Though I hear you've had quite a morning. Word travels fast, Ellie observed, straightening her cardigan. Hard to miss 50 Patriot Sentinels bikes rolling through town, Lisa replied. Want to tell us what happened? Inside the VA center, as the meeting began, Ellie shared the morning's events. The room was packed with veterans of various ages, from Vietnam era to recent conflicts. Their reactions ranged from anger to grim determination as they heard how the Night Reapers had treated one of their own. I remembered something this morning, Ellie said, her voice carrying across the quiet room. Something from my last mission. In Vietnam, we were pulling out a group of Marines under heavy fire. The helicopter was taking hits. Hydraulics were failing, but we couldn't leave those boys behind. The room was silent, everyone leaning in to listen. Even the Patriot Sentinels members stationed outside had come in to hear her story. One of the young Marines asked me later why I came back for them when everyone else said it was too risky. I told him something I've never forgotten. Sometimes the biggest act of courage is standing up for others when everyone else looks away. Steele Grayson, standing at the back of the room, nodded slowly. That's what we're doing now, Ellie. Standing up for Riverstone. But before anyone could respond, the distant roar of motorcycles filled the air. Through the windows, they could See clouds of dust rising from the road leading to the VA center. The Night Reapers were returning, and this time they'd brought reinforcements. Looks like Talon called in some friends, Steele Grayson observed grimly, counting the approaching bikes. At least 30 more riders. Ellie stood, her movement drawing every eye in the room. Robert, I won't have violence at the VA center. Tease. People come here for healing, not fighting, agreed Grayson replied, already moving toward the door. Delta team, escort our veterans out the back entrance. Everyone else, mount up. We're taking this somewhere else. The Patriot Sentinels moved. With tactical precision, helping the VA meeting attendees to safety while preparing for confrontation, Ellie watched as Lisa Wong efficiently organized the evacuation, proving that military training never really faded. Outside, the Night Reapers and their reinforcements lined up across the street from the VA center, their bikes forming an intimidating wall of chrome and steel. Talon sat at the center, his face twisted with anger and wounded pride. "Come on out, old woman," he shouted, his voice carrying across the parking lot. "You and your veteran friends can't hide in there forever." Steele Grayson stepped out first, his presence commanding attention. Behind him, the Patriot Sentinels took positions, their formation precise and threatening. Ellie emerged last, her head held high, showing no fear. "Son," she called out to Talon, her voice clear and steady. "You're making a mistake. This isn't about pride or territory. It's about right and wrong. Stand down before someone gets hurt." Talon's response was cut off by the sudden arrival of police sirens. 3 patrol cars screamed into the parking lot, lights flashing. Chief Daniels, a Vietnam-era Marine himself, stepped out of the lead car. "Nobody's fighting at my VA center," he announced, his hand resting meaningfully on his sidearm. "Talon, you and your boys need to leave. Now." Attention the air could have been cut with a knife. Talon looked from the police to the Patriot Sentinels, then to Ellie, his face a mask of fury and frustration. Finally, he kicked his bike to life. "This isn't over," he snarled. "Not by a long shot." As the Night Reapers reluctantly withdrew, their reinforcements following, Steele Grayson turned to Ellie. "He's right about one thing. This isn't over." Ellie watched the dust clouds fade on the horizon, her expression thoughtful. "No, it's not, but maybe that's not such a bad thing. Sometimes it takes a storm to clear the air." Chief Daniels approached them, holstering his weapon. "Ellie, Robert, we need to talk. The Night Reapers have been a problem for months, but now they're desperate, and desperate men do desperate things." The morning sun had reached its peak, casting harsh shadows across the VA center parking lot. As Ellie looked at the assembled faces, police, veterans, friends, she knew that Riverstone was about to change. The only question was, would it be for better or worse? The war for the soul of their town was just beginning, and she was once again in the pilot's seat. Just like in Vietnam, lives hung in the balance, but this time the enemy wasn't hiding. In the jungle, they were right here in plain sight, and they weren't going anywhere. Chief Daniels led Ellie, Steele Grayson, and several senior Patriot Sentinels members into the VA Center's conference room. The blinds were drawn, casting striped shadows across the wooden table where they gathered. Outside, the remaining Sentinels members maintained their vigilant patrol of the perimeter. "Let me be direct," Daniels began, spreading a map of Riverstone. "Across the table, the Night Reapers have been systematically taking over this town. They started with protection rackets on 3rd Street, then moved to intimidating business owners in the historic district. Now they've got half the town terrified to speak out." Steele Grayson leaned forward, his fingers tracing the marked locations. "How many are we dealing with?" "Core group is about 25, Daniels replied. "But after today's show, Talon's called in favors. We're looking at maybe 75 riders total, spread across 3 affiliated gangs." Ellie studied the map quietly, her mind working with the same tactical precision that had kept her alive during countless missions. "They're not just causing trouble randomly. There's a pattern here." She pointed to several locations. "Look, they've established a presence along every major route in and out of Riverstone. They're not just terrorizing the town, they're controlling." "It's smart observation," Daniels nodded. "But that's not the worst of it. We've got intel suggesting they're moving into drug trafficking, using Riverstone as a distribution hub. Steele Grayson's face darkened. Not anymore. They're not. Easy, Robert, Ellie cautioned. We need to be smarter than them. Tell me, Chief, why haven't you moved against them before now? Daniel's expression turned bitter.
Politics.
The mayor's office is worried about escalation. Plus, we've got reason to believe someone in City Hall is on their payroll. Meanwhile, across town in the Night Reaper's warehouse, Talon was holding his own council of war. The reinforcements had brought not just numbers, but experience hardened. Riders who dealt with rival gangs before. The Patriot Sentinels is different. A rider from one of the allied gangs warned. They've got military training, discipline. They're not your typical MC. Talon slammed his fist on the table. I don't care what they are. This is about respect. That old woman humiliated us in front of the whole town. We let this stand, we might as well pack up and leave. Maybe we should, Buck suggested carefully. Find easier territory. The suggestion earned him a violent shove from Talon. This isn't about territory anymore. This is personal. That woman, those veterans, they think they're better than us. They think they can just waltz in and take what's ours. Back at the VA Center, the strategy session continued. Lisa Wang had joined them, bringing coffee and her own military intelligence background.